Thank you for joining us for episode 2 of our Microsoft 365 webcast series, Empowering People to Stay Productive. We have some great guests for you today, but let's kind of take a step back and talk about our previous episode and what we plan to cover today. In our previous episode, we talked about how to enable people to meet and collaborate from home, as well as with the change of so many physical events to virtual events, how to best handle that and how to handle internal communication between not just end users, but management and users. This week, we're going to dig into how to deliver a great virtual desktop experience. And as users start to use a variety of devices, now working from home in a variety of locations, it's not just their laptop. They're using mobile devices, browser only. So we're going to talk about how to make productivity applications available on any device. With me, I have two great guests, as I said, so let me go ahead and introduce my first guest, Mr. Peter Wiglevin. Hi, Peter. How are you today?
Hey, Stephen. Good morning. Thanks for having me. We're going to talk about Windows Virtual Desktop today, so it's an honor to be here.
Awesome. Thanks for joining us. And with me from the Microsoft 365 team, TJ Devine. Hi, TJ. How are you?
Hey, it's going great. Thanks for making this and setting this up.
Absolutely. Glad to have you. All right, Peter, we're going to start with you, and we're going to talk about how to deliver productive desktop environments with virtualization. I'm a huge fan of Windows Virtual Desktop. It's a tool that we've been using for a while at Ignite. We did a great demo in our Microsoft 365 Hub where we showed running Windows Virtual Desktop, for example, on an Android phone with a USB-C hub, keyboard, mouse, monitor, and running Visio. And people were just blown away that you could run an app like that inside of a mobile device and do it. So it really opens up some interesting scenarios, for people. So let's start with, what is Windows Virtual Desktop? What are some of the scenarios and verticals that can leverage this technology?
It's good to hear you had a great experience with it. It's a pretty powerful solution. So for most people who are attending this event, they're probably aware of virtualization in general, the concept that you remote into another machine and you work remotely. So a lot of the power consumption, or at least a lot of the, for example, graphics, you can leverage on the other side that you're remoting into. Now, historically, if you wanted to set up your own virtualized environment, it could take weeks, but probably more likely months, and it was a complex project. You had to purchase server hardware, you had to purchase licenses, then you had to build everything, and of course, manage, patch, update. So what we've seen is that, like mentioned before, like most customers or partners, it took months, if not longer, to build a virtualized environment.
Yeah, and people have to do in days what they had planned to do in weeks. So yeah, this really makes a big difference as you're planning and how to best support those remote users.
Yeah, exactly. So now you can just, with a few mouse clicks, you can spin up your WVD, your Windows Virtual Desktop environment. So you no longer have to manage all of that. Microsoft takes care of a lot of what we call the back-end infrastructure. Also, if there's something broken, you don't have to troubleshoot. It's on us. It's on Microsoft. So we've seen a huge interest in the service, and especially now that, like you mentioned, because there's an increasing amount of people that are supposed to work from home. Windows Virtual Desktop just is a perfect fit.
Cool. Well, let's jump into a demo, because I want to show how you can use this technology both on web, on mobile, on a desktop, and what the difference is between this and something like Windows 10 multi-session. So why don't you take us into a demo?
Yeah, sure. Like you mentioned, we have several clients available. So we have a client available for Android, for iOS, for Mac. So pretty much any browser that supports HTML5 can be used to access any of your Windows applications. We can also show remote apps versus full desktops. Just tell me where you want to start.
I think that'd be great. Let's talk about the difference between app virtualization, when you have an app that either you want to virtualize or lock down or maybe doesn't work in Windows 10, versus full desktop. So why don't we start with app virtualization?
Okay, great. So let me show you the Windows client. This is the one that we built for Windows specifically, runs on Windows 7, runs on Windows 10, pretty much any Windows operating system that's supported today. And as you can see at the bottom, let me just zoom in. I got a couple of what we call remote apps, these ones. You can tell by the icon. So if I launch any of these applications, and I'll do that soon to show you what the experience is like, we will just see the application, not a full desktop. Unlike this thing over here that says full desktop, like the name suggests, it shows you a full desktop. Now, depending on what you want, so as an IT admin, you can mix and match. You can either make a remote app available or full desktop or both. And what we've seen so far is that about 50-50, there's a split of 50% of customers that like to offer remote apps versus full desktops. So let me just launch, let's see, Visio. I think Visio is a great example because I don't use Visio a lot. I use it maybe twice a year, and it's very unlikely that I have Visio installed. And whenever someone sends me a Visio file, I don't feel like installing Visio. So instead of that, I just open Visio from my virtualized environment. And here you can see it was almost instant. And that's also because I already authenticated once. So in preparation of this demo, I already launched a remote app. So the second one is just instant because all of the authentication is already done. Now, from that point on, you can just use this like a local application. It's the same. And what we discussed during the introduction is we're using the compute power of a VM hosted in Azure. So, Stephen, you were saying you were doing this on an Android phone.
Yeah.
It could be like a low-cost budget Android phone. You were not using the compute power of the local device, but of Azure, which, as we all know, well, it has some compute power hidden in there.
Yes. So really what we're doing is we're basically sending a signal to Azure, and then we're redrawing and showing what you're doing here locally. So kind of almost like a thin client, but with a lot more manageability and with greater speed and elasticity.
Yeah, exactly. And going back to your initial question, like what kind of verticals or use cases do you see? And for example, government, they like to virtualize a lot because of security reasons. And with just a few policies, you can make sure that only pixels are transferred, nothing else. So you can't copy and paste data to your local machine, which is awesome. You have a clear separation between the endpoint and the actual server where your data is hosted.
So it's great if you want to lock down a user or lock down an app that you want to make sure all the information is, managed and controlled and not being moved to a personal, maybe unsecure or unsafe device because it's not being managed through, Intune or, an app like that.
Yeah, exactly. Maybe you have a contractor or bring your own device scenario. We've seen it as well, being very popular in education. Students, they come with all kinds of endpoints and you don't really know what they're going to bring in, and you definitely don't want to manage those devices. So setting up an environment like this, you transfer only pixels and you're done. But we also have customers that want to have full integration. They want to have the ability to have files locally, to have redirection and copy and paste. And that's just as possible, and it's very easy to set up. So depending on your wishes, we can make a highly secure environment or a full collaboration with the endpoint. It's up to you.
Awesome. All right, let's show desktop and move to that. And then I also want to show what it's like to do it just strictly through the browser. So why don't we move to desktop?
Sure. Sorry, I forgot to show you one thing before we move to the desktop demo.
Yeah, of course.
Sometimes I get the question like, how do you even know that this is a remote app? And the key way of knowing is by looking at this thing over here. I hope you can see it. It's called a glyph. And this is how you can tell that this is not a locally installed application, but it's an app which is installed on a VM somewhere in Azure, and I'm just looking at the output.
Now, you do have to have an online connection to launch that app, or what do you do if you're in an offline experience?
So we require that you have an internet connectivity, but it can be even a high latency. Well, of course, there's always a limit. But in general, what we've seen is that you only need like a 3G connection or something in order to have your app virtualized. But if it's a completely isolated environment, virtualization might not be the best fit.
Right. What kind of bandwidth are we looking at before we go to the desktop app right now for running Visio like this? Is how much bandwidth are we using right now?
So right now, since we're not doing anything, it's close to nothing as well. And it depends a little bit on the type of application. Like if you're watching a movie, of course, we have to transfer more pixels. if you have a 4K monitor or maybe two 4K monitors, that will double the amount of pixels that we need to transfer. But in most scenarios, if it's nothing extreme like that, we're talking about a few megabytes per second. It's really not a lot.
Awesome.
And we also have some guidance. I'll grab the link later. We have some guidance on what we think the total amount of network consumption will be depending on your scenario.
Awesome. All right, let's take a look at desktop, and then we have some questions, so then we'll get to some of the questions that we have.
All right, sounds good. So now what we're going to do is launch this full desktop. And I already did it just in advance. So maybe that went a little bit too quick. So let me just make sure that everyone's following. So in the background, you can see my local computer. And then the window, which I'm dragging right now, that's my virtual machine running in Azure. Now, if I make this full screen, so now we're no longer looking at my local device anymore. But I hope you agree that this looks like Windows 10, right? We have our start menu and our modern apps, and I can see that Office Pro Plus is installed. So it looks like normal Windows 10 Enterprise. Would you agree?
Yeah, absolutely.
But it's not.
It is not.
It is not, but it's something very close. So this is what we call Windows 10 Enterprise multi-session. And as the name suggests, it's multi-session. But what does that mean? It means that you can have one virtual machine shared by multiple users. So I'm logged on to this machine, but it could be, and we're going to check in a minute to see if that's the case, it could be that there's multiple people logged in concurrently, each having their own session. And this is a huge cost saving because now you can spin up one virtual machine, which can be shared by 10, 20, 30, depends a little bit about your design and what kind of VM you spin up, but you can have dozens of people sharing one VM.
So this would be great for like IT support or something like that, where you want standardized desktops and you want it to be the same, but you have a wide variety of people that are going to be logging in during that shift to help to support those folks.
Yeah, that's a great example. So let me show you the key differences. First of all, here you can see that this thing has, well, let's see, it has 8 virtual processors and it has a fair amount of memory installed. So here you can see it has 32 gigs of memory installed. So this is a VM running in Azure. If I go to the user tab, you can see that right now, I can actually zoom in if that helps a little. So here you can see that we have a few users logged in. 2 are in a disconnected state, so they logged on and then disconnected their session, and 2 are actually working at this moment. So some other guy named Paul, and then it's me. So the 4 of us are now sharing this virtual machine, which reduces the cost significantly. The other way how we can tell that this is not a normal version of Windows, if we go to Settings, we go to System, and then About, and we scroll down a little bit, here you can see that it says Windows 10 Enterprise Multi-Session. We're actually running an insider preview, but that's not super relevant. So here you can tell that it's slightly different. The other thing I like about working remotely in a VM on Azure is that apart from the compute power and the memory, we also benefit from the network that Azure has. So if I would do a speed test, and it always needs to get warmed up a little bit, I've done this a few times, and if you just wait a couple of seconds, eventually we'll go up to 1 gig per second.
Sure, but you're also running video and you're running a live event right now, and then running this inside of the desktop, that's doing all of that as well.
Yeah. So I could connect to this with a 3G connection and still browse the web with the speed of 750 megabytes per second.
Awesome. All right, a few questions have come in. The first one, and this is one of the biggest ones, is how do you get this? And I know that if you have E3 and E5, it's a 1-to-1 license. So for every Windows 10 license you own, you now also own a license to this. Is that correct?
Yes. So if you have Windows E3 per user, you have access to Windows Virtual Desktop, and you can spin up a collection of operating systems. Now, what we've seen, let me go back. Customers can choose from Windows 7 with 3 years of extended security updates. So you can run Windows 7 until January 2023. You can also spin up Windows 10 Enterprise, just the same operating system you're running on your PC. You can choose for Windows Server, and then you can choose for Windows 10 Enterprise Multi-Session, the thing we just looked at. The vast majority of customers and the VMs that are running under WVD are running Windows 10 Enterprise multi-session. And the reason I'm saying that, I'm mentioning this, is because it doesn't require a remote desktop client access license, an RDS-CAL. So if you have Windows E3 per user, you have access to WVD, and you can spin up Windows 10 Enterprise multi-session without any additional licensing cost.
That's tremendous. So that really opens up a lot of opportunities for folks as they take a look at how do I just give everybody a desktop that's working from home on their Mac that they need to launch either through the app or through a browser and be able to standardize that without incurring any additional costs. Because really all you're paying for is the Azure usage. What's the Azure usage like? What should people expect? Because that's obviously going to be a big question saying, hey, I can get rid of Citrix or, you know, VMware or something like that. What are we looking at cost-wise?
The answer is it depends.
Right.
Depends, of course, on the amount of VMs that you spin up. If you choose a low, let's say a cheaper VM or a very expensive N series with a dedicated GPU card, it all depends.
Got it.
But we do have some ways of reducing the costs even more. By default, you can run the VMs under WVD against Linux rates. So you pay a cheaper compute rate per hour. That's just an additional benefit of the service. And furthermore, we have something which is called RI, reserved instances. And that means if you commit for a VM for either 1 or 3 years, you can get a discount up to 72% as well.
Wow.
Now, that's all great. But going back to your question, we get that a lot. Like, what kind of cost should I be thinking about? So one thing you can do is go to the WVD cost calculator. And this page will show you, it will allow you to just create your own environment. And you can just pick and choose, like, what kind of a workload do I have? Do I have office workers? Do I have maybe very light workers that only need a browser and nothing else?
Right.
I think it's under compute.
And we'll share this URL for everybody at the end of the broadcast.
Yeah. So with a few basic questions about the region, what kind of setup you would like, how many users, how much hours you think they will be using it. And then if you scroll down in the end, you can see for 500 users, you're talking about, well, I didn't change anything, right? So this is just a random number we're looking at.
Yeah.
But then you can just kind of calculate what the predicted cost will be.
Perfect. So we have a few questions. A big one is really, how do I manage this or set up templates or choose what apps people are going to get? So I'd like to do that. And I also want to show, the HTML client, the Workplace Azure hosted. So why don't we jump into that?
Yeah, sure. So one of the things when we designed WVD, we thought about the management of the VM, like who should be in charge of that? Should it be Microsoft or should it be partners or customers? So we've done a lot of research. And it was pretty clear that our customers told us we want to be in control of the virtual machines. We want to make sure that, if we want to scale up or scale down, or if we want to install apps or manage it, that they want to have the flexibility. So that's how we designed the solution. Microsoft will take care of the management plane. We'll make sure we'll route all the connections accordingly and properly, while still giving customers and partners the flexibility to manage their VMs. So you can use existing solutions like SCCM or Config Manager, and we're working on MDM or Intune support as well. And so that will allow you to just manage the content of the VM itself.
And one of the things that I like, and I use this, is I don't use the multi-session, I use the single session, but I've turned on and connected my OneDrive, my folder redirection feature. So when I log in, all my files, all my desktop stuff, everything is there and ready for me to use. And that's just tremendous, where if I lose my laptop or something goes out, I can switch over either to my phone, to an iPad, or even just through the browser, go to the URL, log in, and everything important is there. So why don't we show the browser connection to this and how that works? Because that really opens up some interesting opportunities for folks.
Sure. So this is the HTML5 client. So you can use any browser. You go to this URL that you can see, and we also have short links for it. You punch in your credentials, or we provide single sign-on depending on the join state of your endpoint. And then you can just see that we have remote apps and full desktops. So now we're just looking at pretty much the same machine, except that we're using a browser. So I don't need to install anything on my endpoint. The only thing I need is a browser, and I can be productive. And to get back to your OneDrive example, I like that one a lot, because whenever I go to my VM running in Azure and I need to hydrate a file because we're using files on demand.
Right.
Now, guess where that file is located? Guess where the OneDrive data is? That's also in Azure. This VM is in Azure. Exactly. So hydrating a file it's so quick, you don't even notice it. It's super fast.
Yeah, I love that feature. I'm a huge fan of it, and it really makes a big difference. So as we do that, so it's just tremendous. So, any other things that people should be aware of with WVD that we didn't cover before we head over to TJ?
We're currently working on some new portal integration, and we expect to announce that soon. So it will be even easier to deploy a WVD environment. But if you're interested, if you just go to your favorite search engine, you search for Windows Virtual Desktop, your first hit, you'll find all the information needed. You can also go into the Azure portal. If you search for Windows Virtual Desktop, that will allow you to create your first, what we call host pool, which is a collection of identical hosts. And hopefully that will help you to kick off a first solution and get your hands dirty with WVD.
Awesome. Thank you, Peter. Like I said, I love WVD. You and I worked on it when we were chatting with FS Logics, when we were trying to figure out a good way for folks to work with OneDrive in virtual environments, and you guys have done some amazing stuff with it. And if this is new to you or you haven't heard about it, and we've had a lot of folks here in the chat that have said, wow, this is just blowing my mind, I wasn't aware of this, absolutely check it out. Start to play with it today, because it will certainly make managing your users in the world that we live in today, which is a lot of challenges for IT pros. It can certainly remove a lot of those. Thanks for your time today, Peter.
Sure. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. TJ, let's talk about how we make productivity applications available on any device, because the ability to work from anywhere on any device is now our new norm in ways that we never expected. So being able to find information quickly, being able to move between a browser and a variety of apps is really critical. So why don't we start with, I know you had some really great stuff around enterprise search that you wanted to talk about, and leveraging the browser and collaboration. And then I absolutely want to make sure that we also talk a little bit about how to secure all this stuff. So why don't you walk us through some of the features and functionality that IT pros may not be aware of, or can really make the difference as people work in these new environments?
Yeah, fantastic. And I think that's the place to start. I'm going to go ahead and share my desktop so you can see where I start every day. No,
I love your XP background. That is kind of awesome.
It's always soothing. But don't let the background fool you too much, because I'm not obviously running XP. I want to show off some of the really cool and I think underused features that we have. Where I like to start on a regular basis whenever I have a question, whenever I'm getting started with something, is down here with the start window. When I just click on this start menu, I see the standard start menu that I would normally expect. There's no typing interface, but I'm just going to start typing. And hopefully people know you can do this to find applications. You can do it to find all kinds of things. You can also use the start menu to find settings. So within your computer, this is all pretty basic stuff. It's all stuff we should be used to. I can also search for information about my colleagues. Let's say I typed your name, for example. There we are. So because Microsoft 365 is a user-based license, because it's able to bring together all the different information about who I've worked with, the documents we've shared with each other, how we're collaborating together, it's able to surface that for me right here. So I can pull up information about whomever I'm having a meeting with, get ready for a meeting. I can also go to documents that you've shared with me.
Now, are these documents and things that are stored in the cloud? Does this require Azure AD, or can folks that are just using domain join be able to do this today?
You can do most, I believe you can do most of this with domain join. What I'm showing you is, especially for documents, this is a document that's saved in the cloud. And that's going to open up a lot more capability. So you see, I clicked on that link and it opened it right into the desktop. And one of the benefits here is up in this top right corner, I can see that you are currently in this document, and it says you're on page 2. If we were working on this together, I could scroll through and see exactly where you are. Now, for everybody watching, this is obviously the script that we were using to prepare for this conversation. So we're giving away a little bit here. I'm not going to scroll down too far and give away the demos that I'm going to do in a second. But tools like this let me catch up very quickly. I can get started and see exactly where we left off. I can also see what's changed. So in the search menu up here, if I just type version history, I can see all the different edits we've made, and I can go back to other versions. Before I edit it, I can open up a version that we were editing at 8 in the morning if we lost a piece of information. So it's simple tools like that allow us to always pick up where we left off, to always stay productive, even when we get disrupted.
So our files are shared in the cloud, and this helps you to give you a lot of that information. Now, I know that we've seen self-installs really grow quite a bit in the past few weeks with everything going on. So how is that affecting how people are working together, and how many people can work together in these documents at one time? When we take a look at collaboration and everybody doing things new, what kind of scale are we looking at?
Yeah, so where I want to start, I'm just going to office.com. There's some really exciting stuff I want to show you here. Office.com is a great way for me to pull up some of the files that I wanted to show based on your questions about collaboration.
Yeah.
So instead of searching for who shared a particular file with me or searching for a file, there's an example that I wanted to pick out of a recent announcement that we made as a company. About a week ago, we made an announcement around the end of support timelines for a few different products. Now, that required the work of over 20 people across over a dozen different teams. All of us were remote. Obviously, we're all working out of our homes or wherever we are. And to be able to come together on such a complicated story took a lot of effort. So I went straight to office.com. I've already signed in with multi-factor authentication. And you can see up at the top, I have access to all my apps. So I can go straight into Word. I can start a new Word document. I can work from a template. I can go back to other Word documents. But the piece that I love most about office.com is this recommended section. This is, as a worker, as an individual, this is my heads up display. I can see all the documents where people on my team or others have recently made edits. I can see where I've been mentioned and somebody's trying to get my attention. I can see how recently we were working on this script together. And this gives me a sense about all the different documents that are in flow and what's happening. I can see what I've recently worked on, documents that have been saved in the cloud and shared with me that I'm collaborating on. And Discover is particularly interesting. These are files that people have been editing a lot recently. So it gives me a chance to know exactly what's happening. Office.com also has this great section just down at the bottom where it shows my teams. The teams that I'm most constantly in are all right here. So if you have a distributed team, if you are remote, if you're working on a device that's not your standard device, you can always pick up where you left off through the browser.
And this is all because of SharePoint Online, because those files are saved to the cloud. The more you work, it creates assistive technologies to help you to understand what's important to you, what you should be looking at or not. And I love the fact that we've actually brought this into the browser homepage. So because we're using, Bing for Business, when I launch my browser, I get this same view as part of my search client. So it really makes it much easier to start to work more from the browser and less from desktop apps, which just creates a lot more flexibility.
No, it's incredible experience. You can see it a little bit here on my screen beneath the titles. You can see exactly where it's saved. Mm-hmm. So some of these files are saved straight into SharePoint. We probably started that document in a team site, and we've continued to work on it there. Some of this is saved in my OneDrive. This is a white paper I'm working on. Some of this is actually saved in another person's OneDrive, and they've just shared it with me, and we've continued to work on it together. Right. And that's the incredible value.
But by saving these in the cloud, we're not going to get that locked out of a file or compare and merge versions or conflict resolution or a lot of those things that people are having because they've either stored them on an X drive or a local C drive or a third-party cloud sharing app. Because they're using SharePoint OneDrive, they're not going to run into those issues, correct?
Yeah. Do you remember the days of so-and-so has locked this file for edits?
Yes.
And then they've gone on vacation? Or they're
gone for the day and they're home. Yeah.
Or how many times have you done the who's got the right version on this? How do we merge these two versions? Somebody's made a comment. So I'm opening this document this was a blog post that we made about a week ago. You're seeing the working version right here. Now, the first thing you can see is track changes. We obviously made a lot of edits in here. Like I said, we had over a dozen people from 20 different teams working live in this document. Wow. Right now, real-time Colab can go what we're calling classroom scale. It can go up to 40 people working in the document at the same time. It's a little much, I'm not going to lie, but we were able to work completely remotely with every single person in a different location and pull this document together. There's a few exciting things that I really want to show you while we're still in here. And the first one is, this was obviously a sensitive document before we announced it. And we have a feature called document labels. So I'm clicking on sensitivity. And because this was a highly confidential file before we announced it, let's go ahead and mark this Microsoft. Oh, somebody else is editing it. So I was able to, before somebody else was editing it, I was able to label it specifically for who should have access. So you can see I could have labeled it for Microsoft FTE only. Data is classified and protected. If the IT admin has set it up in a certain way, if I tried to then share this file outside my organization, it would block it. If I downloaded this file to my desktop and attached it to Outlook and tried to send it to somebody outside my organization, it would actually be caught and it wouldn't be allowed to leak. Depending on how I've set up the settings, I couldn't even share this screen over Teams.
So this is really key, because this is something we've talked about. Is it's no longer about securing the device; it's really about securing the data. And this is one of a half dozen different ways that you can do that. But what's key is that when the person leaves the company, they no longer have access to any of this data, no matter where it's stored. And while you're working on things like this that are confidential, we can say, hey, only FTEs can view this. No one that is a vendor, no one that works outside the company, with just a click or two. And this can be done at an admin level, an individual, or a combination. And that really ensures that it doesn't matter what device you're on, because if you're not supposed to have that document, you won't. And if you're supposed to, you can get to it and really work with it. And that's really at the core of what we're talking about here.
No, it gives you a level of confidence when you're able to work remote.
And we can have up to 40 people working on this concurrently at the same time, correct?
Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Security, we have about 7 to 8 minutes left. I really want to talk about security. So why don't we jump into that and talk about OCPS, what that is, and how it really helps you to sort of manage this remote workforce.
Great. So everything else I showed was live. This is my only canned demo because I want to show you exactly what an admin would see, what an admin would experience. So I'm sharing my screen. This is showing config.office.com. I'm going to go ahead and just go in. So from config.office.com, you are able to set up your Office policies. You're able to set up some of your device policies. If you have Office 365, you probably already have access to this. Now, we've also incorporated this into Intune in a very deep way, and Intune's very powerful. But if you're just getting started with cloud policies, if you're really just figuring out if this is right for you, I would recommend you check out OCPS today, if you can, and see how this could work for your benefit. With OCPS, we're able to set all of our Office policies. So as I was talking about, we're able to create groups. We're able to set policies. I can take the Office security baseline and I can apply it in here. It's fantastic. Now, as I was saying before, the Microsoft 365 product is a user-based product. When I sign in through the browser and it pulls down all my files and it pulls down everything else. If I pull down Pro Plus onto a machine, it pulls down all my settings and everything else. When policies are set in the cloud, they're able to follow my person. They're not tied to my device. So that means when you've set a policy here and I signed in on a browser on somebody else's computer on an unmanaged device, it'll pull down those settings as well. It's an incredibly powerful tool for remote teams, for teams that are constantly moving around.
And this is key as you move between, maybe iOS on a phone and an Android tablet and your Windows desktop. It's going to follow you wherever you go. And because your files are in the cloud, they're accessible across all these. So you're getting that same experience no matter what the platform is. And that's really at the core of this.
Yeah. Or just yesterday when my laptop died because I had misplaced my cord. And
of course, it's a day before a big demo. It has to go that way.
And I've got to work on my script with you guys. So I borrowed my wife's laptop, but it pulled through all my settings. It was completely secure. Now, there's one more really exciting thing. Now, we were talking a little bit about from an end user, how I'm able to benefit from all these files saved into the cloud. I can see who's edited, who's tagged me, who's @mentioned me. I can pull together this information and benefit from it. I want to show you quickly how an organization can benefit from that usage information as well. And that's Security Policy Advisor. So what Security Policy Advisor does is it actually, after you've set up a group, about 14 to 28 days after you've set up a group, it continues to track the behavior of people in that group, what people are actually using. So for example, here we've set up a series of groups. I'm going to go ahead and click on HR. And Security Policy Advisor has looked at what people are using and most importantly, what they're not using. I think people listening to this call will know when you set a security policy, the first thing you're concerned about is, will this break a productivity flow? And you try to follow your best practices, you try to do your research. But in the end of the day, you set a policy, you kind of sit by the phone and you just wait for people to complain. Here, because we're using cloud policies, we're able to see what additional settings we could make that would not impact anyone's policies or anyone's productivity. Here, Secure Policy Advisor has said these additional settings can be changed and they actually won't affect anyone in the group. To give you an example, let's go to the VBA macros. Here, it's telling me I can disable all VBA macros in Word without disrupting anyone. And in fact, because we have Office ATP, it's able to say, I've been attacked. I attempted, failed, captured, but I've been attacked across this vector so many times over a certain period, and I can see exactly how many different people this would impact.
And so, you can this also taps on, I'm assuming, to our security center data and all of that, our security reports that we get and all that. Yeah.
All of this is deeply integrated. So as an admin, I'm able to benefit from a huge amount of confidence. I know I can lock this down without impacting anybody. And if things change, because certainly over the last few months we've learned that they do, this will monitor and see, oh, people are asking to override or people are attempting to do this. I can also allow users to override if they want, and it'll give me a flag. It'll keep track of that and it'll let me know this policy health isn't what it used to be. Maybe we should reevaluate. And so that's the huge value of moving to the cloud and being able to unlock these things.
TJ, where do folks go to learn more?
Yeah, so the first place is obviously go to office.com and take a look at some of the aspects and features that I just showed you. The last piece I walked through was Office Security Policy, the Office Cloud Policy Service, sorry.
And that's all on docs.microsoft.com/office. Yeah,
exactly.
Perfect. And Peter, with your rough eye today because of the allergies.
Yes. Just visit aka.ms/WVD, and that will bring you to the page that should get you started.
Awesome. Gentlemen, thank you for your time today. This was absolutely tremendous. Folks can reach out to you via Twitter because we put up your Twitter handles, and via LinkedIn and all the other great ways, or just reach out to me, Stephen L. Rose, on Twitter with your questions, and I'll be happy to get them to Peter and get them out to TJ. Make sure to check out aka.ms, WAC Enabling Remote Work, where we also have a lot of these links and resources for you to check out. It was a great session today talking about how we make productivity available on any device and how we deliver a really top-notch, best virtual desktop experience. In our next episode, we're going to dig into how to secure, manage, and unmanaged devices and remote access applications. So you're going to want to join us for that one. With that, again, thank you to our guests. Thank you to everybody, and thanks for joining us today. We appreciate it, and we will see you next week.